Welcome to Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. Decoding the beliefs and strategies of global experts to give you an updated mindset to make the most of modern life. Hosted by the UK's most in-demand and highest-paid hypnotherapist, Adam Cox.
This is Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. I'm your host, Adam Cox, and joining me today we have Rachel Fiori, who is a mystical therapist and a high-performance coach for high-profile people. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I love being here. Thank you for having me.
More than welcome, Rachel. So give us a little bit of an idea, because I've come across many different therapists, many different kind of niches, obviously hypnotherapists and NLP practitioners and CBT therapists. What exactly is a mystical therapist and how did you become one?
Yeah, good question. So mystical therapist means that I combine the truth of who we are. And that means that we are a divine soul. We are a soul having a human experience. And a lot of times in traditional mental health or psychotherapy, for example, we tend to focus only on the human aspect of us. And that means we're completely negating the fact that we're a soul having an experience. You can't fully heal that way by denying half of who you are. So it's an integration of both. A lot of people that go very spiritual, very woo-woo and way out there tend to focus only on the fact that they're this spiritual being, having this experience here in this lifetime, but they're ignoring the human part. And we're both. And so mystical therapy is bringing in the facts, the truth, and a lot of scientific evidence that's finally catching up, that we bridge that psychotherapy and that spirituality. We bridge together the fact that we are all energy. And in order to change and transform at the deepest levels, we need to understand there's more to us than just our human brain and our physical bodies. So it's a combination and integration of both of those truths.
I mean, that really is fascinating. And I think before the industry of therapy, I would say religions, which is probably the dominant way in which people interact with their spirituality and spiritual beliefs, probably was the primary way in which people dealt with feelings of grief or addictions or emotional pain or loss and all these kind of things. And you can in many ways think of praying as a form of self-meditation. It's generally a trance state, thinking inwards, a form of self-hypnosis, you can call it. So people have in the past looked to religions maybe to deal with these kind of problems. I would say relatively new, we're talking in the last century, you've got more Eastern, kind of philosophies and kind of beliefs about what energy and mysticism is. And they're massively growing in popularity. Do you think, from your unique perspective, that there is a move away from, let's say, structured traditional religions to more open-mindedness in terms of spirituality?
100%, without a doubt, not even a question. And here's the biggest difference between the two. Mystical teachings, which, is similar to spirituality, is to finally stop living as a disempowered being by praying to something or someone outside of yourself. It's to no longer live in fear of what's going to happen if I sin, the nonsense that gets taught in order to control us. And it doesn't mean there are not beautiful aspects of religion, by the way, but as an entirety, no, thank you. It's very controlling. It's very hypocritical in some aspects. Mysticism and spirituality is to connect to your internal power because you're an extension of source, universe, creator of all that is. Whatever feels comfortable for you is fine. That's the expansion of it. It's not limiting. So when we realize there's something bigger, but we're a part of that bigger thing, we are an extension of it. We're part of that. That is who we are. But we're here having this life experience on earth. And so when we have more of an open, expanded mind, that means we're able to then have a more open, expanded heart. And we're able to connect to our inner power, find our inner power to heal, to change, to transform, instead of being dependent on some force outside of me because little old me isn't powerful enough to heal myself. There's enough of that nonsense. It's time for that to go away. We're powerful divine beings. We can heal and transform and elevate ourselves if we have the right guidance and the know-how and gain the skills. We have to be willing to do the work. A lot of times when we rely simply on traditional methods or maybe religion or something, it's, I have no power, I have to pray to somebody to change my life for me. How disempowering and weak is that? Oh my goodness. And then we wonder why we can't heal and change stuff in our lives, or why our relationships go to shit. No, I have the power to change. I just have to be willing to learn how. That's the difference between mystical teachings and spirit and authentic spiritual teachings versus relying on some paradigm to change you. Now that's disempowerment. I only come from a place where I teach people empowerment, true power, how to connect to it and what to do with it once you get there.
I think it's a beautiful distinction because, I think most people don't really reflect on their own emotional resourceful states in particular. And you're right, a lot of religions tend to have the narrative of an omnipotent, being at some level. And we're all, whatever metaphor you use, the flock, the followers, it's a very hierarchical power structure where effectively you're led and you're trusting someone outside of yourself rather than having the resourceful confidence to kind of follow your own path. Do you think, metaphorically speaking, it's just kind of occurred to me that we're seeing conventions challenged in let's say certain structures. So if we're looking at let's say technology, you would have big corporations, they would control all of the code and that kind of stuff, and then you've got the counter of that is kind of open source, where there's a much more freedom, kind of fluid approach. Would you say that spirituality is more of a way of accessing kind of faith and kind of beliefs about the bigger things without necessarily subscribing to a dogmatic religion? Is that how you would define it?
Absolutely. It absolutely is, because it teaches us to come from the actual authentic place of what divine truth is. Not my perspective, not my programs running, my woundedness being projected onto everybody, not my feeling of insignificance, which I don't want to see or admit that or realize that I have. And so I control things outside of me to make me feel better on the inside. If I control you and you don't trigger me, I'm going to be happy and feel okay on the inside. This is how we run our lives individually and relationships and corporations. Oh my goodness. And instead of doing that, it's the mysticism and spirituality is more, well, there is a universal truth. Are you willing to up level yourself, elevate yourself to the level of truth so that you can function from there? That's the bigger question, right? So it's slowly dropping the little me, the wounded me, the weak me, the one where I feel disempowered and I don't think I can change my life. I have no power or control, or I'm trying to control everything because I don't know how to step into my true power. Am I willing to do the work to let all of that go so that I can live in pure freedom? The freedom, if you want to talk about spirituality or source or a higher power, it's challenging us to expand and elevate to that level while we're in human form. That's the path. That's the challenge. Am I willing to let go of the little me in order to be the expanded me and the most magnificent version of me in this lifetime without the ego coming with it? That's freedom. That's freedom. That's power. And that's learning to live from divine truth.
But the counter argument of that is that if it's about empowering individuals, then the responsibility is still with the individual. And I think what appeals to a lot of people about, whether it's kind of religions or destiny or something like that, is that they're relatively passive in that process. So, that if you're looking for, a reason to do very little or not take on challenges, not push yourself, that's quite a convenient, I think, narrative to have, is that you are a small part in this kind of massive universe and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Because what we learn in religion is you're little children, you're God's children. Well, children get their needs met. Children are taken care of by a patriarchal father that knows everything that's best for you. How disempowering is that? So what does it do? It doesn't allow people to spiritually or emotionally grow up. It doesn't allow people to grow up.
Yeah, it encourages, quite a dependent kind of state. So it's an interesting that your take on kind of spirituality being, about empowerment, about resourcefulness, about freedom. Would you say that personal responsibility and self-discipline is necessary? You know, a lot of people would say, right, to get freedom, you need discipline. To feel resourceful and to be empowered, you have to have personal responsibility. Would you agree with that kind of sentiment, that it actually requires a bit of work to kind of get that stuff?
It is a warrior's journey. It is a warrior's journey, absolutely. I always use the terms, it requires two things: willingness and devotion. And the willingness to do it, to learn, and the devotion to doing so. And so absolutely it's work. And it's work because you're not, as the example I used before, you're not a little child anymore. You're not an infant. You're not a baby who depends on mommy and daddy for everything, get all your needs met, and you just passively live through life and hope that they care for you in the best way. No, it's time to grow up. And in order to grow up and be free and have emotional freedom and be really healthy and powerful in our mental state of being, our emotional state of being, and our spiritual state of being, we have to be willing to do the work. You know, the analogy I often use is, if you want to lose 40 pounds and get in shape and get really fit and maybe the best shape of your life, you don't do so by binge watching Netflix and chowing down on whatever you can find in your cabinets or your fridge. You have to actually work out. You have to do the work. So there's no such thing, for example, as, you know, working out and being healthy, not working to get you like in shape or to get you healthy again. You have to actually do it. And you cannot go exercise one time. There, I did it. No, that's like going on a retreat and say, I'm changed for the rest of my life, don't have to do anything else. It's an immaturity. We have to grow up. Mysticism and spirituality actually challenges you to take radical responsibility for your life, for your relationships, for your business, and to grow up enough that you can let go of all the childish ways we keep ourselves small.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I think for those people that are, you know, I would say attracted to mysticism and spirituality, there's a high correlation between those that believe in the law of attraction. And in my experience, a lot of people that like the idea of the law of attraction also have this very passive viewpoint that if they have that vision board, if they vibrate at the right frequency, whatever that means, suddenly that Lamborghini is going to be in their driveway, that, you know, $1 million check is going to be in the post. And does this come from wishful thinking? Does it come from laziness? You know, from your perspective, because obviously, you know, being a therapist, you know, someone that deals with problems, you know, there is quite often the root cause of the problem is an unwillingness to take responsibility and unwillingness to address the, you know, whatever the actual issue is. Do you think humans are inherently lazy, or do you think we'll just follow the path of least resistance? Whatever is attractiveness and appealing enough, we'll take that pill. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. I mean, we want the quick fix. We want the quick fix. And the law of attraction, you know, that's a universal law. Does it exist? It exists. But I always tell people to take that shit and flush it down the toilet. And the reason is, it doesn't mean it's not real and that it doesn't exist, because it does. However, that is one piece to a 1,000-piece puzzle. And we often are trying to grasp onto that one thing that's going to finally fix me or my life and make me happy. And it isn't just one thing. We are complicated beings. There's a process to learn why you're stuck and struggling and still in pain. It's a process to learn how to heal all of that. To truly transform that, you have to go to the deepest level, the root cause of it. If you don't do that, you're spinning your wheels. I don't care how many affirmations you say today. I don't care how many years you've listened to law of attraction nonsense. A lot of it comes from pure ignorance in people, because there's so many more factors into why your life is the way that it is right now. It is not just about the law of attraction. Again, one piece to a 1,000-piece puzzle. So how many other pieces are creating your life as you are experiencing it today? And if you really want to transform it, the last thing you have to think about is how to change it because of the law of attraction. You don't even have to do that. At Masters of Self University, at the programs that I offer and that, you know, this university offers, it actually teaches people you do the hard work, you learn the process, you have to do the work. However, when you do, that's when you actually see things like the law of attraction working in your favor. Stuff will align and come to you because you're doing the work and you're not focused on that one little puzzle piece. You've actually expanded and you've looked at the other puzzle pieces. Now you can put the puzzle together.
I totally agree with that, because I think for me that there's two fundamental ingredients to the law of attraction that are necessary. One is the law of cause and effect. You know, you have to do certain things to increase, you know, in my opinion, every business plan is a vision board. You know, you're setting out an outcome that you want and then a plan, a strategic plan to get that. But you don't hear people in boardrooms talking about quantum physics. You hear them talking about what do we need to do and how do we need to refine the approach. And the other thing I think is belief systems, because if you have, let's say, a belief that is disempowering, that's going to shut down the very resources necessary for you to take the action or do the work to actually get the outcome and influence that. Or, you know, as humans, we're deleting the vast majority of stimulus that we access. If you have a belief that you can't do something or can't achieve something, you just don't even see the opportunities when they're there. And that's what I think a lot of people are missing when they just focus on law of attraction, where you've actually got to take the action element and have the belief systems that align with that. Obviously, you're a therapist. You know, you work with a lot of people that are, let's say, dealing with problems. You use the metaphor there of the root cause. I love that, because I think the medical industry, the healthcare industry, is really the industry of managing symptoms rather than kind of getting to the root cause. Why do you think we've got healthcare systems which don't actually address the cause of the problem? I mean, if we look at the food industry, for example, the food industry has a huge motive to make profit. The most addictive and least expensive foods are foods that are high in calorie, very low in nutrition, makes nice profits for the food companies, but basically creates obese nations with, you know, blood chemistry, which is conducive to disease. And then you've got the healthcare industry, which don't really want to stop the problem, but just kind of medicate the symptoms or you know, help, you know, reduce the impact of, let's say, pain, inflammation, those kind of things. Why is there such a huge disconnect when you've got a population of intelligent beings that are quite happy to do the very things that cause huge amounts of problems, and then have no desire to get to the root cause, but just to manage that migraine or that pain or that depression that they're feeling? Why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, so there's a couple of answers to that. And one is on the behalf of medical systems. And I can tell you in Western medicine, I've left Western medicine for this very reason. My personal experience when I was working in hospital systems as a therapist, I can tell you that every time I would approach the highest levels of the medical system, everybody in charge, let's create and develop a new program and implement this program. I've created the entire program. We just have to figure out how to implement it. It was about preventative medicine. It was about education. It was about shifting people out of being dependent on insurance companies and being in ill health. And what they told me every single time was, absolutely not, Rachel. Sick people make us money, healthy people don't.
Yeah, it's the sickness industry rather than a health industry. And
it is.
And you've obviously discovered that, and that's what led you to change your path,
Yes.
Which certainly shows high levels of integrity in your own, you know, value system there. Do you see similar things within the mental health area? You know, so you obviously saw it with physical health. Do you see similar patterns in terms of mental health, that people, they just want to kind of numb that pain or deal with that anxiety rather than getting to the root cause of what's causing it to begin with?
Well, a lot, yeah. As an occupational therapist, I specialized in mental, emotional, and behavioral health. And when it's the same thing, when people try to seek help, what they're told, what they're taught by traditional therapists and their physicians and psychiatrists alike, and medical doctors is, here are the pills, that's incurable, you can't fix that, you have to be on this prescription, that drug, you have to do this, you have to do that, and there you go. Are you kidding me? How disempowering is that? And you can heal yourself if you learn how.
Yeah. And do you think that's because it follows the medical model? Because you've got the American Psychiatric Association, the DSM-V 4 or 5, whatever it is now, and effectively they want to diagnose it, they want to label it, and then effectively They want someone to come up with some pharmacological prescription to treat that condition. Is that because they're funded by the medical industry? Is it because they're doctors that became psychiatrists and that's how they think of it? You know, what's the fundamental issue? Because we are seeing it in terms of, I would say, physical healthcare. You're getting much more functional medicine. A lot more people thinking, you know, like Dr. Axe, Dr. Hyman, that looking at this and saying, hold on a minute, clearly what we eat influences our health. And therefore, if we change what we eat, if we change how we move our bodies, a lot of these illnesses go away.
Yes.
Are you seeing, do you think there is a lack of, let's say, functional healthcare and the mental health side of things
100%.
that's leading to that kind of distorted model?
100%. Absolutely. Because traditional therapy is very passive. It's very, let's have talk therapy. I don't do any of that. You know why? It doesn't heal anything. It doesn't heal anything. And I don't care how much you want to pay me, by the way. I'm not going to take your money. I won't take you on as a client. I will not allow anybody to come into this field they're not ready to heal. And that means you're not going to sit and complain about your problems. What we are going to do is we're going to bring all the problems, all your challenges up, and we're going to learn together. I'm going to show you step by step, a little bit at a time, how to actually heal all of it, because it doesn't have to be a part of who you are. Are you ready to authentically heal? If you are, let's get to work, because we have a lot to learn, right? And the process that I take people through is a beautiful program. I've spent my entire, career creating what works at the deepest level, the fastest way possible. Fastest way does not mean you're going to do something overnight. It is a process. That's unrealistic. You don't heal if you're 30, if you're 60, if you're 85. You don't heal what you've carried around with you your entire life in a matter of a week or two. That's just being honest. And we have to learn how to come from a place of integrity, transparency, with what it means to wake up to all of the mental programs that we have running, the emotional programs that we have running that then affect our behaviors. So our behavior of self-sabotage, whether it's in business, in your life, in your friendships, romantic relationships, all come from the same root problem, the woundedness that you might not even have a clue is there. And no, it doesn't have to come from some big trauma. Everybody always looks for some big major trauma. No, you're human, which means you've had little micro traumas throughout your entire lifetime. And if you never knew what to do with them at the time to heal them and process them, they've become a deeply rooted program that is now infecting your life or your business or your relationship, and it will forever, because they run on autopilot. It just runs on autopilot, period. And whether you know they're there or not, that's how they run.
Yeah, it's the unconscious, and a lot of people seem to think of the unconscious as somehow mystical, but the way I look at the unconscious is that it's just a very helpful thing. If we had to consciously think every time we blinked, every time we took a breath, every time we walked, you wouldn't have the cognitive capacity to do anything else. So it's actually very useful to do things on autopilot, except for these programs that you talk about that maybe were helpful at one context. If you're a 4-year-old and how you resolve a situation is by throwing a massive tantrum, well, it might have been useful in that context, but not so useful if you're 40, but the programming is still there. So how do you play detective and figure out what those root cause problems are? And then how do you resolve them?
Yeah, beautiful. So the amazing thing about the programs that I've created at Masters of Self University is you take step by step. You first start with the easiest thing to see. You learn what mental programs are. And every week you have a curriculum where you focus on, okay, what are my mental programs that have been activated? And you start to, oh my God, it's increasing self-awareness is the key for phase 1. It's learning what mental programs are and then being able to see, oh my God, I'm running these mental programs right now. Isn't that interesting? We don't judge them. We don't shame them. They're not bad. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just running. So let's just see them. Let's see them without shaming them or saying they're wrong or bad. And then you focus on what emotional programs are. You learn what that is. And then you focus on that for a week. And you do it week by week, step by step. You say, oh my God, I run thousands and thousands of programs in a matter of a day. Holy shit, how am I even functioning here? And then because you're willing to see them, we go slowly deeper, deeper, deeper into Okay, so how old are you right now? You learn to realize, you learn in this moment when I'm triggered by something, I might be really scared, or I might be really frustrated at this situation. Well, that means you were triggered by something. You're running a program. It's that simple. You're running a program. So if you're running a program, then it can be healed. It needs to be healed. Otherwise, it's going to keep running forever. It's that simple. So you learn to see your programs, and then you learn to connect them to your past by learning. Of course, it's a process. I'm simplifying this, but how old am I right now? And when you realize that in your everyday life, you actually show up as a 12-year-old or a 4-year-old, and you're in an adult relationship, or you're the CEO of your business and you're showing a 12-year-old's running your business 70% of the time. Well, you want to heal that. You wonder why you're having trouble in your business or your relationship, because a 12-year-old's in charge, for example. Then you go in and you learn what it means to heal those things. When we use coping mechanisms, when we use things outside of ourselves, oh, I feel like shit, I'm in a bad mood, I'm going to go work out. You're avoiding, you'll never heal it. You have to learn what it means to drop into your heart, to drop into the pain, to drop into the darkness and say, it is okay that you're here. That is unconditional love. You learn what it means to actually love yourself that you didn't get when that program got created. And it's not love that comes from anybody else. It's not something outside of yourself. So if we learn, I always say, you're going to learn how to fall in love with pain. And people get really freaked out and scared by that at first. Because we're conditioned to be disempowered. Instead of, maybe you had somebody that you love just died. Well, there's pain there, isn't it? Because there's grief. Of course, you're going to be in pain. But what do we do with our pain? We run from it. We avoid it. We suppress it. And that's what causes our problems. For even physical illnesses come from that, because it's never been healed. So we learn step by step to go down and see what programs are running. There's a grief program running. This is why you're so sick physically. Let's learn to love and heal the grief. Once it is healed, once you learn how to embrace it with love, it absolutely transforms organically on its own. But you have to be willing to meet it with love. And if you're not, it's going to stay there forever. If you learn what it actually means to meet it with love, and that's not just some phrase, it's the process I teach. You go in very deeply, you learn to love it. It can't stay anymore. It can't, it's impossible. So there's no such thing as it doesn't work. It's just, are you willing to learn how to do it? And are you devoted to doing it?
I mean, this is fascinating, Rachel, because it reminds me of a process that I go through whether you call it parts therapy or ego state therapy, that there are functions of the subconscious mind that have got some kind of positive intention, but how they execute that positive intention clearly isn't working very well. Yes. And you're right, you have, when you're negotiating with these parts or programs, as you would use, you have to treat them with respect and acknowledgement that they are doing the best they can with the experiences that they've had, and quite often they're not communicating with different parts. That 12-year-old version of that CEO certainly isn't communicating with that wise kind of experience part. They're just kind of taking control. They're in the passenger, they're in the driving seat at that point. But it is such an important element to acknowledge the gratitude and the respect for their function, to then negotiate how better now do we deal with this situation with the additional knowledge and experiences that we have. And that can create magical transformations. I've seen it a lot with victims of sexual assault, that actually at the point of that trauma, and obviously that is a big trauma, right. Typically I've seen two key responses to that. One, to become very small in the world and kind of hide away. And that becomes a coping strategy, because if you're invisible, nobody sees you, you're kind of safer. Yeah. And the other is to be very big and kind of rebellious and confrontational, because that powerful state. And that either of those things are very useful in that context if the positive intention is to stop you from horrible pain, humiliation, hurt, but perhaps not if you're then a parent, or perhaps not if you're in a career, in a workplace. That same programming that was really useful in one context becomes really unuseful in a different context. And it's about resolving that. And in terms of the process that you do, because you said you don't really use talking therapy to get to that point, what kind of way do you kind of resolve those changes, if that makes sense, to help heal those kind of, let's say, programs, those kind of traumatized parts?
Yeah, so I take them through the process of, which I briefly mentioned, in understanding what programs they're running first. What programs are activated right now? Because when you see what's activated, you can then go in and heal them. So you move through this process of self-awareness and then transformational healing. You can't heal what you're not willing to feel, and you can't feel anything that you're trying to suppress or ignore, that you're not willing to quote unquote see, right? So it's bringing self-awareness to everything, all of our pain, all the programs that we run that we don't even realize we're running. And then anything that is an inner child wound, for example, I teach people how to become the mystical parent. There are a lot of people, I call the mystical parent, because you're going back in time. People usually will do some degree of inner child healing. A lot of people know about inner child healing. A lot of people do it to a percentage. They do it to a degree, and then they get stuck. Like, well, I've done inner child healing for 10 years, but my inner child still gets activated. That means it's not healed yet. Your inner child, you're an adult. A child shouldn't be running your life, period. So that lets you know, oh, there's still healing to be done. So the mystical parent means you go in, you absolutely, with unconditional love, process what happened. You have to do that. If you don't process it, it never goes anywhere. And then the second part, though, is growing that part of you out of the program. So that's a process in itself. And in the coaching program I offer, that's what people learn how to do. So they love and nurture first, because we need that. Oh, I see the pain. I see the trauma. I see what happened. I see the programs that got created for survival. Oh my goodness, great. Let's love that inner child, so that inner child feels absolute unconditional love, validation, acceptance, right? That's unconditional love. And then we have to grow the child out of the program, so there's no more child. So that's a two-step process that I teach people how to do. And you just do it a little bit at a time until you get good at it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, it was totally something that would have triggered me and has triggered me my whole life. I didn't care. Didn't affect me. There, you know, you're healed.
Yeah.
There, you know, it's done.
See, that really is fascinating, because I think that seems to be a slightly different approach when I work with it, the new, because it seems like you don't want the inner child to be part of their life anymore. It's kind of like, once they're healed, they've kind of served your purpose. Whereas what I tend to do is to say, well, you don't want the inner child being the parent, and you don't want them being the boss or the career person. But what if we make this inner child, head of playtime, because even adults, they need to have fun time. So maybe they're not the main person in charge, but they've got a function within their life, if that makes sense. So they've got that kind of outlet. Because personally speaking, I think more people need to be in contact with their inner child, but within the right context. In the wrong context, it's a mess, but in the right context, it can be really, really useful. But it seems like what you're saying there is that a lot of people have got these kind of childlike or child created programs running in completely the wrong context. And then they're using things like antidepressants, food, alcohol, drugs, not to resolve, absolutely, distractions, not to deal with the root cause of the problem, but just to kind of numb the pain or distract them from, these programs that are doing. So, it sounds like we're very much on the same page there, because a lot of people, they don't want to get to the root cause. So long as there is a pill or a potion, they'll take that instead.
It's very scary. Yeah. And my different approach is, I'm going to say a couple of things about it, is number one, we're not children anymore. Well, you're not a child. It's time to integrate and heal that poor child. Let him or her grow up. However, what's interesting, as adults, we run the program. We've been brainwashed to think that as adults, you don't have fun. Holy shit, let's heal that program. Are you kidding me? Playful nature is actually your divine nature. Children are here partially to teach us remind us of our divine nature. It doesn't mean we have to be children ourselves or unhealed children still, functioning in our lives. It's let's heal and grow that up, but grow it up to your divinity. And divinity does nothing but play and laugh and have fun with life. It's only unhealed adults who are very serious and don't have fun anymore. It's ridiculous. I play every day of my life. Every day.
It's almost a compensation, isn't it? If there isn't that unhealed, kind of part, these become the ultra serious people because they're trying to compensate for this child being in control in different areas.
Yeah.
But if we can harness that element of creativity and play and fun, and I would also say authenticity, you don't see children, children that are like very free. They're not pretending to be anything that they're not. They're very kind of genuine and they're just in the moment. And mindfulness, you don't really need to teach children mindfulness. They're just mindful all the time. They're kind of in their world. So I think there's a lot we can learn from, children as adults, and I think we forget sometimes how to have fun and do that element, within our lives. What would you say is the most common issue or occurrence? You work with very high profile clients. It seems like you're doing what I do. I kind of work with like celebrity CEOs over here. You're doing it in the States. What issue is the number one issue that you see time and time again?
The not having the real education and skill of true transformational healing at the root. Because we so lack integrity in the coaching industry that anybody can call themselves a coach and they're not trauma trained, they're not educated, they're not trained enough. We so lack integrity. And even in therapy, we've such outdated therapy practices. One of the biggest things that's been around for a while now is cognitive behavioral therapy. Blech, sorry, I puke all over that. I don't want to hear that word anymore. You can't heal anything at the behavioral level. A behavior is a symptom of the root problem. It's not the cause, it's not the problem. Behavior gets us in trouble. Oh man, behavior sends us to prison. Behavior gets us arrested. Behavior gets us divorced. Behavior's not the problem. There is a wound, there are problems, there are programs we're running that if we can't get to the root cause, try so hard to change your behavior, how much success are you going to really have? It's really hard, if not in some cases, impossible to change your behavior. You can't. Why? You didn't heal the wound. That's why. You didn't heal the root cause. So when we look at things from a different perspective, we understand that, we don't have the education in society yet to show us how to actually transform. And yet we love to call everything transformational healing. It's a bunch of crap. We lack integrity. Coping skills are not transformational.
Absolutely. It's just managing.
Don't allow you to heal. Yeah. It prevents healing.
But it's good for business in the sense that, if you've got, some kind of product or thing, and it simply makes people feel better temporarily as a coping strategy, well, then that creates an addiction. Most addictions are built on coping strategies that work temporarily, but actually don't actually get to the root cause. So great for business, but you're right, bad for integrity. Obviously, you're highly critical there of CBT, and I would say a lot of the second wave, elements of CBT, the original kind of Skinner, kind of ideas of kind of, cause and effect and change the behavior by getting to that belief. What do you think of the third wave, things like, acceptance commitment therapy? Because those actually do, still forms of CBT, but actually do deal with some elements of beliefs or values behind the behavior, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we're improving. I think we're growing a little bit when it comes to this stuff. I can tell you that the majority of my clients, if they have not been to therapy or coaches and they haven't done a lot of self-work, I typically won't take them as clients unless I really believe in our consultation, they're really going to do the work. And the reason for that is they have to first experience what doesn't work, because a lot of people still look for the quick fix, and they're not ready to go into their pain so much. And having said that, I have had so many clients over the years who have had the different forms of therapy. And I can tell you the people who have come from, most of them who have come from a cognitive behavioral therapy background, and that's the therapy that they were receiving, they have a lot farther to go compared to people who have had different types of psychotherapy that are out there. So even in having the experience with therapists who've given up CBT, for example, and they won't do it anymore, but also clients who have come to me where they're like, but I've been in therapy and CBT is like the best thing. I've just experienced it in a way, and I've trained in it. I've experienced it in a way where it just doesn't get to the root and it doesn't get to the problem. It focuses way too much on the distortion or the dysfunctional behavior versus getting to the root problem. And hardly in the experiences that I've had with clients and the programs they've been in, a lot of them haven't even discussed the way that they were raised in their childhoods. And it doesn't mean you had to have a traumatic childhood, but almost all your programs were created by the time you were 7 years old. Why are we not going back and learning what kind of parenting we have and giving people this education? Because these are where your programs come from. So if you're stuck, even just financially, guess what? You have to go back and see how you were parented, because it is 98% chance it's linked to that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the nervousness comes from this kind of idea of, there's lots of negative associations with Freud, and obviously Freud was a big fan of kind of talking about childhood and also false memory syndrome. You know, if you take people back to a childhood, there is this kind of fear of litigation from implanting memories. And so I think there's probably a nervousness from therapists, but I agree, you know, this is where it happened, you know, but as long as you use your language open, you know, do you remember when, you know, and then take them back to a specific point, you know, when they can relate to, without actually kind of giving the context of that. You can't blame for a false memory if you're not giving any context. It's their own memory that creates it. But you are right. How do you see the pandemic being this kind of idea of a mental health time bomb, this kind of collective trauma? The therapists that I've spoke to have two diametrically opposed, you know, theories on this, very few in the middle. Either this is an absolute nightmare and it's going to traumatize a whole population, or that humans are more resilient than we give them credit for, and they'll just adapt and kind of move on, and things will be back to normal pretty soon. What's your take on how the pandemic is affecting mental health?
Yeah, so it's a mirror of what your mental health actually is. There's my take. It's a mirror. It is an absolute mirror. And I'm going to segue and say, even in our romantic relationships, a lot of times we think we ask for help because, oh, my partner. Your partner is a mirror, mirroring back to you every single thing that you need to awaken to within yourself that needs to be healed, acknowledged, or loved into transcendence. A pandemic is exactly the same thing. It shows you how much judgment you have, how much resistance. It shows you how childlike you're being, throwing your tantrums. It shows you the level of prejudice or, again, judgment of other people for how they choose to show up in the world when there's a pandemic. It's showing us the intolerance. It's showing us, well, let's take away all your coping mechanisms. What do you have left? You have yourself. So if you're not powerful in yourself, you're going to blame a pandemic for your negative mental health. Oh, that's a disempowered being. If you have yourself in a pandemic, I can say, oh, well, I tap into my inner power because this is a challenging experience. Challenging experiences are there to give you the opportunity to grow and expand. It reflects and mirrors back to you how well you're doing at that. And we don't like to look at it that way. We don't like to take radical responsibility. We like to look at everything around us and say, my unhappiness or my mental health or emotional health is because of what's happening out there. Well, you're not taking any responsibility for how you're showing up in the world. And then we wonder why we're trapped in childlike behaviors.
It's a trap, isn't it? Because it's convenient and it protects the problem of having to deal with it yourself. But by not having to deal with it yourself, then it means you can't deal with it yourself. You know, you've only got the coping mechanisms because you're not taking any responsibility for the cause of what that actual kind of pattern is. I agree with you. I think for those people that are very stressed, the pandemic makes them more stressed. For those that are very anxious, makes them more anxious. For those, you know, like me, that's very kind of opportunistic, I just saw lots of opportunities in the pandemic, you know. So I think you're right. It is a reflection of your own belief systems and values. How was it for you? What did it reflect back for you?
It allowed me to see that outside circumstances can't affect me in a negative way, and it's not going to destroy my life. I mean, and I want to make this distinction. it doesn't mean you won't have preferences. For example, do I prefer to not go through a pandemic? Yes. If I could wave a magic wand and not go through a pandemic, I would, I would prefer not to ever have to put a mask on. I don't want to be forced to wear a mask. I don't want to go to the grocery store with a mask on. I didn't, when the gyms opened up and I went back to, instead of working out at home, I had to wear a mask. Oh, that sucked. It was terrible. I have my preferences. Did that change my state of being? No, absolutely not. I walk my talk. I walk 100% what I teach other people. I have done it myself. I have healed myself from the inside out. And anything that I still need to do in the times of challenge, I do them. And that's what I teach other people to do. And the result is you're free. So I move through life as a free person, not because of what rules I do or don't have to follow, not because of my damn government. Get out of here with that. I am free because I choose to be free. I don't let things outside of me affect my emotional state. I'm too powerful for that. Those are the things that I teach other people in the programs that I offer, because who doesn't want to be free? Some people don't, and that's okay. I won't judge you for where you are. But if you want to be free, you learn how to do this so that when a pandemic hits, you don't have a shitty life and blame it on a pandemic.
Mm. And it's all about perspective as well, because I share those beliefs in the sense that, there's always some things that you're not in control of. The infection rate, that's how, government policy, that's not within my control. So I accept those things that I'm not in control of, and then really focus on all the things that I can influence, I am in control of, and that makes me feel free. Mm-hmm. Why do you think there's so many people out there that are looking at these areas that they're not in control? So it's kind of like, okay, you have to wear a mask, and you've got lots of people getting very angry about that, or people being encouraged to get vaccinations and getting very angry about that. What do you think is the positive intention behind that? Is that because they want to be a crusader? Is that because they want to, fight for justice because they see, this kind of stuff? What do you think is the positive intention? Because it would be a lot easier for them just to look at, well, yeah, you can't control these things, but I can control my finances, my free time, my career and all this kind of stuff. What's the positive intention behind focusing on those tiny bits that aren't so great and making that the world?
I think that it gives us opportunity to make kind of mass change, growth, global growth. But I think a lot of people they're not coming from a place of power when they do it. They're coming from a place of force. They're coming from throwing tantrums. I'm unhappy about this and I want to control this so that I can go back to being happy. Instead of, if you really feel that there is injustice, it's not about looking the other way or pretending there isn't, or pretending something isn't unfair. You really believe there is injustice, and we sure have enough of that in the world. We could give a lot of examples of true injustice. It doesn't mean don't speak up or, quote unquote, I don't like to use the word fight, but rise up in order to create change. We need a lot of change on the planet. We're going through massive change, whether people realize it or not, a global transformation. However, when people come from hate, anger, violence, judgment, all you're doing is creating more of the same. That's all you're doing. When you come from a completely healed, whole place, I can see that there is injustice over here. And that's something I'm going to rise up and use my voice and speak out. I might protest even. I might do other things about it. Great, but I'm coming from power. Why? I'm not triggered by it. I'm peaceful in my heart, but I can be peaceful and witness an injustice and then play my part in making sure this change is on our planet. Now I'm coming from power. If I see an injustice and I'm angry and I'm pissed off and I'm hateful, all I'm doing is adding more of that to the world. And I'm claiming to come from a good place because I want to create change. You're not creating change in that way. You are creating more of the same. If you look at a coin and one side is heads, all you're doing is flipping the coin to the other side. Yeah, it's a little different. It's still only worth 25 cents. It's not suddenly worth $1 million. No, power to create change. Now we're increasing the price of things, the worth. You see it? So we have to be very careful when we try to say that we want to create change. Well, but where are you? Where are you at? Are you walking your talk coming from power? Yeah, get out there and create the change. We need you warriors, right? If you're hateful and resentful and angry and pissed off, sit at home, call your coach, your therapist, get a part of a program, heal yourself. And once you're healed, get out there because we need you.
It's that quote, isn't it? You know, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yes.
And I think you're right, because it is very, very easy to see incompetent and corrupt politicians making,
Yes.
you know, what seem to be decisions out of self-interest and their own power plays. Yeah, anyone can get really angry, but you know, that question of how does that anger serve you? You know, well, quite often it doesn't, and it just creates these kind of loops. And unfortunately, anger is also an addictive coping strategy because it completely takes your attention away from anything else that you're thinking about, and then that can kind of fuel itself, and you know, has its own path. If someone's listening right now, Rachel, and they're pretty sure that they've got some unresolved traumas, they're running programs that are not helpful for them, how do they learn more about your program? How do they learn more about you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. They can go to mastersofselfuniversity.com. mastersofselfuniversity.com. It is a mystical institution of higher learning that guides you to self-empowerment and self-actualization. You can see the programs that are offered there. You can fill out a consultation form, get a consultation from me directly to see how I may or the programs may be of help or service to you. But Masters of Self University, mastering self, that's what we're here to do. That's why become the master of yourself is to master everything within you that needs to be healed, elevated, loved, so it's no longer holding you back from being the most magnificent version that you can be in this lifetime. So mastersofselfuniversity.com, that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. And we're going to get that link in the show notes. So whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast, you know, look in the show notes and you'll have a link to learn more about there. And I love the title because it really is empowering, and it does communicate that there is an element of responsibility there. You know, any form of mastery doesn't come easy. You've got to work on that to kind of acquire that kind of competency, that level required, but it's worth it, I think is the key thing. So check out that webpage. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor and pleasure. Thank you, Adam.
More than welcome. And to you at home, thanks for joining me on Modern Mindset. See you again soon for more.
Thank you for listening to Modern Mindset with Adam Cox. To automatically receive the latest episodes, please subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, please share this episode with just one friend you think it could help. And if this episode helped you, please leave us a 5-star review. Modern Mindset, picking the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours.